waiting for Anton, maybe we can get started by kicking off and get everyone has a chance to give an intro, maybe talk a little bit about your project, as well as what platform you chose to build on.
Cool, yeah, I can start. So I'm Tanner, I'm from Kik. We're the team that initially launched the cryptocurrency Kin. Kin is now used by about 57 different apps. So we're just one participant in this broader ecosystem at this point. When we first launched Kin, we started on Ethereum. That had its challenges. So we started working with Stellar, ended up forking Stellar. We've been running our own fork of Stellar with other people in the ecosystem for the past year and a half or so. And then just recently we put forth a proposal to the broader Kin ecosystem about a potential migration to Solana. So we're in that proposal stage right now. Been lots of interesting learnings building on Ethereum, then moving to Stellar, a fork of Stellar, and then looking at different public chains, and then ultimately putting forth this proposal. So lots of good learnings along the way, and I'm sure might have some insights that might be helpful to some people in this panel.
Yeah, definitely want to dig in on you guys forking Stellar. I think was a really interesting choice, and maybe some of the learnings there. Dylan, do you want to go next?
Hey guys, I'm Dylan. I'm one of the co-founders of Commonwealth Labs. We're a decentralized governance startup. So we have two products: Commonwealth, the chain, essentially governance interface. And then we also have Edgeware, which is Polkadot smart contract platform. So for us, we started, back in 2018 with a large focus on formalizing governance. So really figuring out the ins and outs of how on-chain governance was actually going to be pushed forward into the future. So we originally had started experimenting with a few things on Ethereum with the Ethereum identity specs, essentially. We found out basically like any transaction, like the gas fees at that time, even like were super high. So it just felt a little bit untenable to actually like push through a transaction or potentially scale something. So it felt really important to build things from the ground up. Polkadot and Substrate was announced around that time. And so we're really excited to be able to basically build things from the ground up. We kind of evaluated Cosmos as well as another chain SDK. But the governance modules that were kind of built in weren't as robust at that point in time. And so felt it was, kind of easier to build within the ecosystem. Yeah, that's a quick TLDR. We launched the chain in February. We're going through the first upgrade right now. We've had a number of proposals kind of go in, and already people are talking about kind of iterating and building from there.
Dave.
Hey, Curtis. Hey, everyone. Tanner, Dylan, nice to meet you guys. And hi to the audience. Thanks for coming and seeing us today. My name is Dave Hendricks. I am the CEO and co-founder of a digital transfer agent called Vertalo. Basically, what we do is we take your shareholder registry, like your cap table, and we put it on chain. And so, if you're a company that's building on blockchain and you've got equity, you can call us up and you can put your equity and your warrants and your options and all that stuff on Vertalo and run it that way. So how did we get here? And what does that have to do with chains and protocols and et cetera? So we started the company in 2016. I was living in London. My CTO was in Austin. In Austin in 2017, we started the company and we built an initial product for my previous company. It was a due diligence product. We built it using smart contracts. It was a way to connect organizations with the people that worked at those organizations for documents and stuff like that. It was kind of solving a HR capital data problem. We initially built it with Ethereum, and then in September 2017, we said, well, look, everyone's raising money. We should, do an ICO and raise some non-dilutive funding using an ICO. And one of my co-founders, who's an attorney, said, no, we can't do that. So we started an STO. Okay, and so in October of 2017, we started an STO. We built all of our smart contracts with Ethereum. And, at that time, it was really funny because there was so much activity that it was getting really expensive to trade these things. It was really expensive to build them. People were really busy. We had to learn everything ourselves. We continued to work with Ethereum for a while, and then we met the Tezos community in the summer of 2019. And we found that we found a lot of synergies between the way that the Tezos community saw the development of smart contracts and how they dealt with wallets and a whole bunch of other architectural considerations that we found that after working with Ethereum for a couple of years were really a closer fit for the way we wanted to build things out. So about a year ago, we started working really closely with the Tezos community, and that's been a lot of fun. We can talk more about that later, but you know, we've worked with both, and we work with some folks who also do some stuff with Stellar and also some private chains.
Thanks for the overview, guys. So one thing you kind of all mentioned is different features that drew you to the platforms that you ended up choosing. When you evaluate a platform, what are the top set of features that go into your decision making, and I'm picking those? So maybe Dylan, why don't you start? You talked about governance modules, but yeah, anything else that were top of mind?
Kind of like the community as well. I think just like building within an ecosystem that's excited to work alongside and just experiment with the projects. I think for us, since it's more developer driven, being able to participate in that ecosystem, a lot of Rust devs, a lot of different runtime modules that can be directly integrated. There's a lot of, I guess even in the past month, a lot of great work going in on, with Web3, the foundation, as well as like other teams, Ethereum compatibility layers. And so we're really excited to integrate that. But yeah, the kind of give and take, especially for the developers, and then just like the broader community, I think it's always nice to be building into a tailwind. That's kind of honestly the main concern. And then with the full kind of like customization, I know we have a different, I guess, like set of features that we're looking for compared to Dave and Tanner from this perspective.
Got it. Tanner, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would agree with all of those. I think for us, when we look at things, there's like three main buckets that we would evaluate in terms of protocols. And one would be developer experience, two would be end consumer experience, and consumer experience could also broadly be bucketed as like performance. But I think there's a lot of nuance within that. It's not enough to just say like things happen really fast, but there's things like what's the fee structure? How dynamic is that? What is an end consumer experience going to look like? And then I would say just alignment with the ecosystem, which kind of goes along with what Dylan was saying. Like a good example would be like, we were working with Stellar, ended up forking Stellar, and through that process, there was a lot of like upstream and downstream contributions. So there are certain upgrades that Stellar would make to core Stellar that we would implement into our fork, and then vice versa. There were times where we were making some type of changes, and that was happening then back downstream to the Stellar core. But there was no explicit incentive alignment between those things. Like there's no explicit value capture that the Stellar core was getting versus our fork. So when we were looking at what things look like going forward, it's important for us to have aligned incentives for the long term as well. So yeah, I would say like developer experience, how easy it is for developers to build. Performance, what are consumers seeing when they're actually using the applications built on top of this protocol? And then how do we have alignment with the different ecosystems?
So when you guys actually forked it, how much of your time was spent, backporting fixes from the Stellar Foundation versus like building your own product?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was a long process, so it's not like it was, and maybe I can just give a bit of history. Like we launched September 2017. About 3 months later is when we started working with the Stellar team to see if it made sense to build on the Stellar protocol, and that was our initial intent. And then we had built a test net to start testing out a few different things. One thing that was a challenge for us and our consumers is different apps within the ecosystem are transacting in very small amounts. So the fee structure didn't make a lot of sense. We wanted to do anti-spam in a different way. So rather than have fees for spam, have a whitelisting process where basically like 95% of the bandwidth is allocated to whitelisted apps, 5% is permissionless, and then assuming that it doesn't fill up and no one's malicious, then you can transact for free. That's not infinitely scalable, but that was an implementation we wanted to do. That didn't make sense for Stellar Core. So that's why in this test net, we ended up just forking it. And basically what it was Kik and then 10 other developers that were building in the ecosystem, all set up independent nodes. So then that was the quorum that was happening there. So it was mostly built out of needs and necessity basis. It was very collaborative with the Stellar team. I think they're really smart and have attacked things in some interesting ways. And ultimately, we just made a decision to fork it. It was something that I think everyone just agreed that the direction we were going made sense to fork.
Dave, so you mentioned with Tezos, their smart contract approach plus their wallet infrastructure were the primary drivers. Any other features that spoke to you?
Actually, the primary driver for us is community and momentum. So those are technical reasons to choose, but really when you're trying to build something which you think is going to have some legs, you don't want to do it alone. You want to have a strong community that you can call on, like we have a Slack channel for this where we can get help from people who are working on different parts of, for example, the core Tezos architecture. So we can call on those people really, really quickly and get answers. And, we're all kind of working in, towards the same direction. We saw that over the last year or so that the Tezos development community has grown dramatically. And where, this community is also highly decentralized. It's not run by a studio, which is run by a whale. And that's a really big issue. When you're building something like us, like an enterprise platform, we're not building a DAO, we're building a real enterprise B2B company. We want to work, we want to understand that we can work safely with the community and not get ripped off, okay, by people that don't care about economic and proper economic incentives. And so we wanted to stay away from whale-driven studio models and centralized models. There's one thing really great about the Tezos ecosystem. The Tezos Foundation had some interesting challenges in the beginning of its life, but now it's making a lot of grants, and those grants are just going out to folks who are building things, and there's not like a central ulterior motive to it, and it's supporting projects all around the world. And so for us, as a company that's building technology for digital assets that is jurisdictionally and asset agnostic, we want to be able to work with teams that are all over the world. And so that was a really cool one. The other thing was that Tezos specifically, it already went through this proof of stake transition, okay? So, if you think about building on Ethereum right now, Ethereum is about to go through what we think is a pretty major fork, and it's going to be a schism. And it's going to affect a lot of people. And, what's that going to look like? Are gas costs going to go up? Are there going to be fewer people validating transactions using the old method? Are we going to have to rewrite everything? The other thing is, we can't stand MetaMask, okay? Anything that's built around MetaMask, okay, that's a recipe for low adoption. And so we wanted to get away from anything that was architected that required people to use awful products. I'm sorry, MetaMask team, total props for getting a whole bunch of people to use something like that. We just don't think that is a normal user experience. And if you want to keep this thing small and everything, like, continue to make things hard to use. And so we found that we could make better UI, better UX products without having to deal with some of the other protocols kind of baggage. And so, those are some of my editorial reasons for choosing other protocols. So.
Got it. That's helpful. So one thing that I think might be helpful to anyone in the audience that's actually like starting a project now is, at some point as a developer, you have to like make your bed and pick a platform. How often are you guys, like, once you've made your bed, like reevaluating the other products out there and being like, maybe we should make a switch, or we should stick with the decision we made? Anyone? Dylan, did you want to start?
Sure, I'll go for it. It's something that we definitely grumble about. I think for us, it's the experiences. Just thinking about the developer experience. I think that's been would be the main driver of kind of like if we were to ecosystem. Substrate itself has like stabilized a great amount over the past year or two. Polkadot's like launching, and so with more eyes on it, it should kind of only improve. But certainly there was a period of time in which thinking about like, okay, did we make the right choice back in 2018, 2019? I think the other thing, I guess, for us that is potentially more interesting is there's a lot of cross-chain integrations that are being built. So Chorus One, building out Cosmos, Cosmos parachain bridge essentially to Polkadot, or to EOS or something like that. And I think the thing for us actually in the future is like, okay, right now Edgeware itself has like its own set of community members, and so if we're going to participate in kind of an interoperability layer, or bridge to other ecosystems, should we just integrate like the Cosmos SDK and then use that for shared security or message passing versus Polkadot? That's something I think that will continue to play out, but yeah, we'll kind of see. I think it's what other ecosystems kind of are out there, and how can we actually participate in them from a shared security and governance perspective.
Got it. And you guys with your stake drop, you sort of bootstrapped existing users on Ethereum, and I think that's like a broader trend is for anyone building on a newer platform is how do you kind of co-opt some of those existing network effects and pull it over onto the new network?
Yeah,
it's Tanner and Dave. Did you guys?
Yeah, I think like Dylan raised a good point there on some of the cross-chain stuff. Like the switching cost is reducing between moving different chains. Like when we went from Ethereum to Stellar, that was a fairly onerous process. There's things like we had to work with, and all the developers had to work with different exchanges to actually have people like move through an exchange. Someone does money transmission to burn one token, then mint a new token. But there's cross-chain interoperability we're starting to see now. Even as we're contemplating a potential move from Stellar to Solana, they run on the same elliptic curve. So there's a way to like recreate public-private key pairs and make that more seamless for people, still in a decentralized way where no one ever touches the private key outside of the user. But the switching cost is reducing. To come back to your earlier question, like for us, like we're consumer product people first, and that's how we've always thought about it. Same with all the other developers in the Kin ecosystem. They're building consumer products. So it's a needs-based requirement for looking at different protocols. Like we're trying to find the technology that supports good consumer experience versus just try to build a science experiment and then see if we can get people to use it after that. So in terms of your question is like, how often are we reevaluating? Like we're always looking at all the different options. From day one, we launched on Ethereum. We're looking at layer 2. We're looking at other chains. Layer 1, we ended up forking our own. That was not necessarily something that we saw was like the long-term, and more things come to market. We're always looking at how those can be incorporated. And then the nice thing is you can have high performant base chains and then different things on top of that that you can start to plug in with things like Cosmos Hub. DeFi is like another, I would say, powerful network effect on Ethereum. But we're going to start to see, I think, that bridge into other ecosystems through Tendermint. So there's just more optionality, and I think that's good for the space as well. Like anytime there's lower switching costs, it creates higher competition and more performance.
Yeah, so we started on Ethereum, and we still support Ethereum, and we can swap from Ethereum to Tezos in our system in, I don't know, about 90 seconds. We can swap from Tezos to Ethereum in about 90 seconds. And we expect that there are going to be other chains that we'll support, because when you build an enterprise product like what we're building, and everyone who's technical on this call understands this, you're actually not building on the protocol. The protocol is just a database layer for certain things. You're not building the interface in the protocol. There's all this other stuff that you have that has nothing to do with the protocol. And it's really the element that you're owning, or the contract that you're creating, or a connection between systems, which is protocol oriented. So this is early days, so early. It's kind of like, it's not even 1994, it's like 1989. okay, in internet days. And a lot of people are forced to use dial-up modems and command lines to do things, and that's why we have such a low adoption. So, choosing, it's super important to future-proof. We future-proofed our platform. We expect to work with a lot of different protocols, but we like Tezos, and we think that Tezos is a really interesting protocol for governance. They've got a self-amending ledger. They've already got proof of stake built in. We understand how the wallets work, and a lot of people are working towards it. So, I don't know, like if you hardwire and hard code stuff into your system right now, you're probably not too smart. You probably should leave some optionality. So.
Yeah, I mean, sort of riffing on that a bit, I feel like people initially started with building on the decentralized platform and then starting to peel some back to centralized, right? Because like if you go full decentralized early, it's hard to get those top of funnel users. Like they have to like onboard to MetaMask, and there's a lot of hurdles there. When you look at your systems, what are parts that you think you could decentralize versus what are things that are worth centralizing to create a better user experience? Tanner, why don't you start?
Yeah, I can jump in. Just like the most interesting and most important thing around like the decentralization is decentralizing value or money, to be more explicit. We think it's important that people have control over that, both for, it's not just a philosophical standpoint, like being able to decentralize money then obfuscates the need to work through traditional banking rails, which is very cumbersome. Like something that we saw early on with Kik was we wanted to build even just like a simple payments platform. And then to look at that, if we wanted to unlock payments in the app just for simple peer-to-peer money transfer, we're going to have to go state by state, country by country to get all these different money licenses. But then if you can have someone be their own bank, you can obfuscate the banking system, not in a malicious way, but just in a way that's efficient, then that unlocks a whole breadth of consumer experience. But on the other side, it's not like we're trying to put every message that was ever sent like on the blockchain. That would just be inefficient. It would slow everything down. So there's certain things that are in terms of like transferring value, that's important, and people can be their own bank, and that's where it unlocks the ability to roll out a global payment system. But it doesn't mean that every piece of infrastructure needs to be on the blockchain. So we start at like, what's the minimum set of things that need to be decentralized? And then even that, I would say decentralization is a bit of a loaded term. It's not a binary thing where it's like you're either decentralized or centralized. There's obviously a spectrum. So it's like, how decentralized does it need to be? Is it that you want to make sure that no one single actor can influence some type of behavior? Okay, what's your threshold for that? And then having different thresholds for different types of activity. If you're moving very small amounts of money, maybe you have a smaller threshold, and then bigger amounts are others. And then same thing with like identity and others. So I think there's a lot of nuance there. We could probably spend hours talking about it, but that would be like the general sense.
Dave, any thoughts?
Yeah, we look to the chain for the data that we present in our visual layer. So we're not storing share ownership or asset ownership centrally, except for a backup record that we keep because we're SEC regulated. I know that's going to want you guys to bring torches and pitchforks to my house, but we maintain very, very important ledgers. At least we think it's important, of ownership of real world assets. And in order to make those assets, to run those assets on chain and also make them tradable, the people, mommy and daddy, have told us that we need to keep an off-chain ledger. Or we should say not on a public blockchain ledger, of logs of what's happened. So in case something goes wrong, there's another ledger. So while the main source of truth for us is so-called decentralized, we also keep kind of a record because this isn't secret stuff. Like, people want to actually fix things when they go wrong. It actually is meaningful for people to fix things. But the other thing is, like, we have to also kind of disabuse ourselves of this notion of decentralization to like all the way out, because most of us are running some stuff on Amazon or EC2 or Azure or something like that. We don't even know where it is. I mean, we don't know whether it's in one crate somewhere, like they just put us all in one crate in case they want to burn us down sometime, or
it's a risk, platform
like
risk.
it shut us off. They're like, "You're gonna cut off the big tube to the Amazon, crate, and then then the blockchain is dead," or whether we're actually on a whole bunch of NA1, NA7, NA9, and EU5 or wherever. I don't know. So I don't know how decentralized or centralized we are, but we try to be decentralized about the right things, which just means anti-fragility. Okay, that's what we're just trying to be, is anti-fragile at the end of the day. And the database, using blockchain as a database, is an anti-fragility measure, and it carbon copy truth. So
great. Dylan, we have 2 minutes left, so I give you the floor on centralization versus decentralization.
All right, I'm for decentralization. Mic drop. No, I kind of want to just echo what Tanner and Dave said. It's a complex topic. I think we're all kind of like, we want to make the thing work in general, and that's kind of the name of the game. And then making sure we take in decentralization along the specific axes is super important. What Dave mentioned about having like a query layer that you can actually use on the back end to just like fill up the UI is super important, just from a load time side. Like, I think if we're pulling all the validators, with 400 validators, like a page, it takes like 30 seconds, and it's kind of subpar from the user experience side. So having a little bit of redundancy there in like a traditional Web 2 setting is really important. In terms of decentralization, I think from the wallet side, also super important to think about. One of the main use cases that we're thinking through right now, doing stake drops and creating other ecosystems on top of the platform itself. And the easiest way to do that, we think, is still through the Commonwealth UI. Right now, we still have to use Polkadot.js, right? So that's like a MetaMask-like solution for the ecosystem. And it's kind of a pain. That's a great first step in terms of a decentralized solution, but having storage, having other things there are super important. Last thing, I guess, is governance decentralization. So that was probably the place in which we're most experimental. So everything is upgradable, from inflation rate, staking rate, setting balances, upgrading the chain itself, all can be done just like from and that's been a really interesting thing. I probably would caution other folks to take that approach. That's kind of like the one decision that we really did push on, and it's been interesting itself. Right now, you can vote to disperse money from the treasury. Interesting proposals have come through, but there's always the side effect of, oh, there's pseudonymous actors here. And it's like, okay, let's wait and see, or like, let's make sure we actually know what people are actually thinking about doing with the Edgeworth token that they might be able to disperse.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the panel today. I feel like we could talk another hour on this stuff easy. The next panel is cross-chain infra.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.